Hello viewers, here is a set of Panasonic telephones. This is the set that came back to me that I did a video on the explanation of that a couple of weeks ago. This is the model number KX-TG575 with the addition of the KX-TG575 waterproof rugged handset. I purchased these for my grandparents towards the end of last year, and it was in service for a couple of months, and then it was removed from service because they couldn't hear them. Now there are some ear issues over there, particularly with my grandfather, but the previous set of telephones that they had was this set, the Unit 1580, and they could hear these fine. And these are not particularly loud, they're very average in volume. So while there is definitely a hearing issue over there, that's not the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem is that the speakerphone volume on these is very low. Now, my first choice of telephone has been Unit forever, and so when they needed a new set of phones, or rather they just wanted a new set of phones, I was going to get a Unit set, but the grandmother doesn't like used products, I guess. So I had to get something new, and so we had the options of Panasonic, VTech, AT&T, and then some other off-brands. Historically, Panasonic has made a pretty good phone, and while they've always kind of held this, I almost want to say an illusion that it was like the best high-end phone available, I think the reason why it developed that reputation was because they didn't have an economy model, so to speak, and so if you bought one of their telephones, it was pretty much going to be decent, or at least satisfactory, whereas you had other brands like VTech and Unit even that made economy models, and some of them really weren't the greatest. So I tend to think that that reason is why Panasonic developed that reputation. But regardless, I decided to go with the Panasonic because I thought it would be a decent product, and I really wanted to like this set, particularly the waterproof phone, because Unit made the waterproof phone, which is phenomenal, a decade ago, and it's been out of manufacture for a long time, and I'm not going to be able to find them forever. I suspect they're going to last for a couple decades, if not more, but it would be nice to have another one on hand that's more readily available if I had a failure. And so I bought this one expecting it to be a decent phone, and it is one of the worst telephones I've ever talked on. I was shocked. I really didn't see that coming. As far as the rest of the set goes, generally okay, sans the speakerphone volume. My grandmother uses speakerphone all the time, so that was a big issue over there, not having the speakerphone loud enough. So here they are back in my possession. I have no use for that waterproof phone. It's a terrible phone. I'm not going to use that, but I guess I'll use the rest of the set for a little while because it wasn't cheap, and I can hear the speakerphone, but it's definitely not what it should be. So anyways, I think this is plugged in. Yeah, everything's plugged in. I guess we'll go ahead and start by calling it up.
Call from Ringed It. Call from Ringed It.
Now, if you notice, the talking caller ID volume was pretty satisfactory. And that's one of the things I don't quite understand about this. Whoops, so there's our tripod kick for the video. If we go and listen to the rings, for instance, whoops, that's not what I wanted. I mean, the ring is pretty loud. It's not great. you know, but it's not particularly quiet. Now, I'm going to go to the outside line here. Let's make a call. And you can see the volume is like half of what it was. And it is up all the way.
Good afternoon. Know-how handles big dreams for small businesses. People's United Bank N.A.
Now, I can hear that.
Member FDIC and equal
okay.
opportunity lender. Today
but
is Sunday,
bear in mind we're in a fairly quiet environment, and I'm speaking at a fairly normal volume, and I'm overpowering that handset. And that really shouldn't be the case. The speakerphone volume should be about lifelike. Now, so for me, my hearing is fine. I can hear that okay. Bear in mind, we're in a relatively quiet environment. I mean, there is that air equipment running in the background, but it's fairly quiet in here. You take this outside, and it's going to sound a lot quieter because outside, you need a lot more power to fill the same area because nothing's containing the sound. So outside, these are kind of hard to hear. And if you was in a noisy environment, or you were doing something with it on speakerphone, washing dishes or whatever, you're making a little bit of noise, you're not going to be able to hear it. So it's kind of a problem. Now, I guess a lot of people just don't use speakerphone anymore because I read a number of reviews for this set, and of course product reviews have to be taken with a grain of salt because you get a lot of people on there that will trash the product because they don't know how to use it correctly, or you get people that work for the company and say it's the greatest thing ever. They probably never even used the phone. So you have to take them with a grain of salt. But if there's a scenario where something appears very consistently, then it's probably true. And I saw a handful of reviews that talked about the speakerphone volume being too low, and I saw some of the Q&A segments. People would ask if the volume is too low, and people would reply and say that it was. But it was not overwhelming. It was not very consistent. It was very sporadic and sparse. So I would boil it down to the fact that people just don't use speakerphone that much. And I would say the same thing for that other Panasonic set that I bought maybe last year now. The one with the waterproof phone. It was a different model than this. It was a cheaper model. The speakerphone on that set was an absolute abomination. It was totally unusable for the opposite reason. The outgoing audio was inaudible. So, and that set was the same thing with the reviews. There really weren't many complaints about it, but I mean, it was awful. You couldn't use it. So I guess people just don't use speakerphone anymore, or at least they don't use it on their land phones. So I'm going to make another call here. I'm going to call the other number, the line quality testing number, so we can hear different voices. I'll mute it so that we have no interference from the background noise.
Fishing in a mountain stream.
After the dance, they went straight home. The hostess taught the new maid to serve.
Adding fast leads to wrong sums. The show was a flop from the very start.
There was water in the cellar after the heavy rain.
I'm going to turn this phone on. Whoops. I can't do that. Okay, never mind.
Smoke poured out of every crack.
Actually, I could still call on this phone. This is a different line now, so this is not a fully accurate test. Okay. Alright, let me call something I know can take multiple calls at once.
Hello, Farmer Jones.
Here are the blueberries with the crop line update for the last
I don't know why this is no longer
day of
working.
picking Sunday, August the 8th. Picking blueberries at the Valley Farm.
What is going on here?
555 Walnut Tree Hill Road, and picking in the morning from 8:30 a.m. till.
Okay, well anyways, What? There we go.
Hello, Farmer Jones. Here in the blueberries with the crop line update.
And there's no comparison on the volume.
Last day of picking Sunday.
Why I can't get this one to work? I'm gonna have to go check and see what happened. Okay, I got both phones on. I don't know what was going on with that. Anyways, here's a sample from this one. And remember, this is very average to even a little bit below average speakerphone volume in my opinion. A lot of Panasonic sets are louder than this one.
All winter by freezing them. We've got some specials, some box specials now for the last day of the season, and some very plentiful, tasty last day of the season, and some very
It's up as loud as it goes.
nutritious picking. Again, at the Valley Farm, where it all began 50 years ago. Please go to our web, familyfarms.com, and go to the Book Now button. Berry Ferry, and go to the Book Now button. Berry Ferry will be at the just up the road a quarter mile, starting at 10 a.m. We'll have at the winery fresh pre-picked. A quarter mile, starting at 10 a.m. We'll have at the winery fresh.
So I think it's very clear to me, at least in person. I don't know if it'll be the same way on the video, but in person, this one sounds significantly louder. It's more kind of like a full lifelike sound. This one is very quiet and muffled. Now I could understand everything that was being said through this call. I could hear everything okay, but I was listening closely. If it was in a noisier environment, I would not be able to hear everything, or if it was outside, I wouldn't be able to hear it as well. Also, that test call is going to a line, it's a landline to a landline test. The person's speaking correctly into the microphone, it's at full modulation. Usually you don't get that anymore. You get somebody calling from a stupid iPhone and it's garbled and hard to hear as it is. Then you put it through the speakerphone, you're going to miss half of what they say, even if you have good hearing, because the reality is the call clarity on the iPhone is like the worst clarity from here to Pluto. You can't find another phone that sounds worse. I don't know why it's like that. For how much it costs, it should sound fantastic, but it doesn't. And there's going to be people that show up in this comments box and say, oh, the iPhone sounds great, it's the best phone. Those are probably all people that are not even old enough to have used a copper landline. They don't know what it sounds like when you call from a correct proper phone to another proper phone. Anyways, the point is the speakerphone is not loud enough on this to hear adequately. And so in my use case, and probably in a lot of other use cases as well, that will be a deal breaker scenario. Now there is another issue that I had with these telephones, and that is the outgoing audio is very, very sensitive. And that's okay in a lot of scenarios. In my case, that's totally fine, because I don't like to shout into the telephone. I'd much rather speak quietly into the telephone. And if you speak quietly into these telephones, you'll be fine. But if you are a phone screamer, which a lot of people are, they think it's necessary to shout into the telephone. If you're a phone shouter, you're going to have a problem. And then what was happening is my grandmother would use it on speakerphone, and she's kind of a phone shouter herself. And so she would put it on speakerphone. She couldn't hear it, so she'd keep it very close to her face, and then she'd shout. So it would be, the problem would be even worse, because it gets more sensitive on speakerphone. It was so bad, the audio was so overloaded that it would actually clip out on my end, because it was just too much modulation. It was that bad. I'm going to do a test call here to our testing answering machine, and we'll see how, what it sounds like. Now it's probably not going to clip out because this is a all hardwired scenario, but when you go through the phone companies and you're compressing the audio and sending it through modems and things like that, you lose some quality. So it's probably going to sound better here than it would in a real life scenario because we're not losing any quality in this case. Anyways, I'm going to record these messages. I'm going to call from the speakerphone on here. I'm going to call from the speakerphone on here. And I'm going to call from the speakerphone on here. Okay? And we'll test what that sounds like. And then we'll call from the regular mode, just phone mode on here, and we'll see what that sounds like. And one more thing I want to mention before I do that is that this telephone's speaker is totally adequate. The volume level on this phone is fine. Well, aside from the fact that this has an atrocious amount of feedback, which is a whole nother issue we're going to get into, I'm going to mute it just to avoid the problem for now.
Here in the blueberries with a cropline update for the last Sunday, August the 8th. Picking blueberries at the Valley Farm, 555 Walnut Tree Hill Road, and picking in the morning from 8:30 a.m. till 12:30. You can enter and pick till 1. And that, folks, is it for blueberries for 2021. So be sure and get out.
Okay, so you can see on this phone, the speakerphone volume, much better than these. This is perfectly adequate volume. Now the problem with this phone is it gets a lot of feedback. Let's get into that after the testing messages.
Find old messages. Message 1.
Okay, this is testing message number 1. This is from the handset on phone mode, and I'm speaking very quietly into the telephone, much quieter than most people would speak into the phone. Now I'm going to switch it to speakerphone. I'm not going to change the distance away from which I'm speaking into the phone. Okay, now it's on the speakerphone. I have not changed the volume or the distance away from the telephone at which I'm speaking. It's still near my face. I'm going to go back to talk mode now. Okay, now this telephone is on talk, and I'm not shouting now, but I'm speaking at a normal conversation volume that most people would talk at. And it's probably sounding okay, perhaps a little bit distorted. Now I'm going to switch to speakerphone. Okay, now I'm on the speakerphone, and I'm still talking pretty loud, but I'm talking close to it, which of course is not the correct use of the speakerphone. But if you can't hear it, the natural reaction is to put it closer to your ear, and then this is going to be the problem you run into. Okay, now it's back to talk, and now I'm really talking louder than is necessary into the phone. But some people talk like this into the phone, so it really needs to be able to auto-adjust itself and accommodate for the louder volume. And now this is the phone on speakerphone at about the same volume and distance. You shouldn't use the speakerphone this way. This is not the way it's intended to work, but some people do use it this way, so it should be able to accommodate it.
Message 2.
Okay, this is the second testing message. This is on the handset speakerphone, and I'm going to use the speakerphone properly this time. So I have the telephone standing up on the table, and right now I'm speaking at about 1 foot away from the telephone. I'm going to start moving back from the telephone. Now I'm going to keep speaking at the same volume. This is a very moderate, typical conversation volume. I'm about 2 feet away from the telephone, 3 feet away from the telephone, 4 feet away from the telephone. One thing I will say about this set, which is really, really good, is the pickup on the speakerphone. Of course, it doesn't matter if you can't hear the speakerphone, but for what it's worth, the pickup on this speakerphone really works pretty good. Now I'm all the way across the room, which is about 11 feet, and I suspect that you're still able to hear me just fine. So now I will hang up this handset, and I want to switch over to the base speakerphone. Okay, now I'm on the base speakerphone, and I'm speaking about a foot away from the base. And let's see, where is the microphone? The microphone is on the bottom, so I'm going to get the piece of wood to put under there for the sake of accuracy. Okay, first we'll do the test without the piece of wood, so this is the phone sitting on the carpet.
Message 3.
Okay, the answering machine filled up, so we're on the second message here. I think it's actually the third message now, but this is still the base speakerphone, and this is with it on the carpet, so it's kind of an inaccurate test, but I'm going to start moving back from the phone, and let's see how good the pickup is. If I recall correctly, the pickup on the base is not as good as it is on the handset.
Message 4.
Okay, so the message cut me off, so it wasn't picking up anything, which is just lovely. Now the answering machine is on a piece of wood, so this would be an accurate simulation to it sitting on a regular desk or a table. And I'm going to start moving back from it now. What I was saying before is that it's kind of ridiculous that this base doesn't work that well, because it should work better than the handset because there's no power constraint. You're not cutting things down to work better on the battery over time.
Message 5.
Okay, this is the waterproof phone on talk, or phone, whatever they call it, the non-speaker phone. Now I'm going to switch it to the speakerphone, and this is where things are going to get really bad. Okay, now it's on speakerphone. I'm speaking at about the same volume and distance as I was before. I'm going to set it down on the table now, and I'm going to start moving back from the phone. So now it's on the table. I'm talking at about a foot above the telephone, kind of the same thing I'm doing with the regular handset. Now I'm going to start moving back away from the telephone, about 2 feet away from the telephone, 3 feet away from the telephone, 4 feet away from the telephone, 5 feet away from the telephone, right down to 6 feet from the telephone, just to take the phone. No recording. Maybe it did pick something.
End of messages.
As you heard in those messages, the speakerphone on the waterproof phone is atrocious. It sounds like the iPhone, in fact. It's really bad. The handset speakerphone pickup on the handset, the speakerphone pickup on the handset is excellent. Really picks up quite nicely. And the distortion I was talking about wasn't too obvious on this system here, and that's because we're not losing any quality, we're not compressing the audio at all. If you're trying to listen through the phone system, it gets worse, you know, like one service to another. The base speakerphone is pretty bad, which is odd because the handset one is so good. And now, ironically enough, the volume is okay on this.
Good afternoon. We offer checking accounts that are right for you. Visit peoples.com to learn more. Peoples United Bank N.A., member FDIC. Today is Sunday, August 8th.
So the volume,
Peoples United.
the incoming volume on the speakerphone on the base is totally fine. The outgoing kind of stinks. Opposite problem on the handset. The incoming volume kind of stinks. The outgoing is exceptional. The waterproof phone, incoming is fine, outgoing is terrible. Now, let's talk about this waterproof phone a little bit more, because the speakerphone pickup is not the only problem. It has a feedback issue, and I think it was heard a little bit on that testing message I did. The earpiece is just full of feedback, totally beyond what's usable. So I'm going to try to use this. See see if you can hear it through this.
Until you walk into our bank, People's United Bank, NA, member FDIC. Today is Sunday.
No, it's not picking up on air because that's that feedback you heard was from the microphone itself, not the phone. Let's see here. Oops. See if you'll be able to hear this.
Here in the blueberries with the Cropline update for the last day of...
Of course, now it's not having a feedback issue. Let's see if we turn a noise reduction on. The noise reduction just sounds awful.
Up in Connecticut and New York. People's United Bank, NA, member FDIC. Today is Sunday.
I don't really hear any feedback though. Let's turn that back off. Huh. How come it's not doing a lot of feedback? Huh. Unbelievable. Normally this thing is absolutely riddled with feedback. Testing, testing. That's ridiculous. Okay, well it sounds okay for the moment. I'll play that testing message again so you can hear what the feedback sounds like.
5.
It
Message
was
2.
number 3 maybe?
Okay.
Or 4?
Message 4.
Okay, so the message cut me off.
5?
Message 5.
There it
Okay,
is.
this is the waterproof phone.
Message 5.
Okay, this is the waterproof phone.
So that sound you heard at the beginning of that message, that is what usually floods the earpiece on this phone. I don't know why in the world it's working okay right now. That's very, very strange. Well, it's probably not that strange because every time you turn the camera on, everything just works correctly, or whatever you're trying to capture stops. Now, I want to do a message live here because I'm not making this up with the pickup on speakerphone is really as bad as it was in the message. I'm not doing anything crazy here. You can kind of hear a little bit of feedback on the speakerphone. You can hear my voice. You shouldn't hear my voice through the speakerphone.
Geese honk.
Okay, so this is the live testing message. I don't know if you're hearing that, but my voice is coming through this speakerphone, what I'm hearing, and that's extremely distracting to me. I'm going to put this down on the table. I'm speaking right here. I'm not speaking that far away. Okay, and you're still going to notice when we play it back that the pickup is atrocious. And let's go over to talk for a brief moment. It still sounds okay. That's really odd. I don't know why it sounds okay now. I mean, it's good, but it doesn't make any sense.
1. New message and 5 old messages. Message 1.
Okay, so this is the live testing message. I don't know if you're hearing that, but my voice is coming through this speakerphone, what I'm hearing, and that's
I did hear some of the feedback there.
I'm going to put this down the table. I'm speaking.
Start again.
Message 1.
Okay, so this is the live testing message. I don't know if you're hearing that, but my voice is coming through this speakerphone, what I'm hearing, and that's extremely distracting to me. So I'm going to put this down on the table. I'm speaking right here. I'm not speaking that far away. Okay, and you're still going to notice when we play it back that the pickup is atrocious. And let's go over the talk for a brief moment. It still sounds okay. That's really odd. I don't know why it sounds okay now. I mean, it's good, but it doesn't make any sense.
End of messages.
I can't believe this isn't having any feedback on it right now. That's wild. Hey, well that's great. Maybe I'll be able to use this now. Suddenly it fixed itself. It used to be so bad that you couldn't even hear the dial tone clearly. Oh, now it seems to be okay. Well, whatever. That's strange. Anyway, so that's the deal with the audio pickup. It's just not good on this. The pickup is not good on the speakerphone, and the speakerphone volume on the other phones is just not loud enough. So, and the bottom line is, if you don't use the speakerphone and you don't want the waterproof phone, the set's probably fine. But for my use case, it didn't work out because the speakerphone volume was simply too low.